Genshin Impact's music has always been one of my favorite parts of the entire game, and as a returning player who left around the end of Inazuma, I finally caught up on my Archon quest up till Fontaine. The music in the Hydro region is no exception to the music that I've loved ever since playing way back when, and one track that caught me off guard was the Overture track titled Fontaine. This track, like its counterparts, is named after the nation, but does not play in-game and contains motifs present in other music tracks in the game's soundtrack. Presented as a concert overture, the track represents the mystery, beauty, and tragedy that is the Fontaine storyline. But what really caught me off guard when I first heard the track was the way that Fontaine's story is told through the music. Before we continue on, I just want to give a huge shout out to Jonathan Baruch and his video exploring this overture and the music theory behind it. I won't be diving too deep into the music theory in this video because I want to explore more about the musical storytelling. So, if you're interested in seeing that video, I've linked it in the description and I'll be referencing it a lot. I also want to say that this video will contain spoilers for Fontaine's Archon quest and Furina's story. So, if you are a returning player and want to play the game yourself, come back after playing. Thank you to the Genshin Impact Wiki as well for making things easy for me to find during my research. Fontaine's prophecy is stated as such from the Genshin Impact Wiki. All inhabitants of Fontaine are born with sin that cannot be absolved. One day, the water levels in Fontaine will rise, and all individuals with sin will be drowned and dissolved, with only the Hydro Archon remaining, weeping on her throne. The Overture Fontaine is written in sonata form, a very nice reference to the late Baroque era in which the region's music is inspired by. Sonata form contains an exposition, development, and recapitulation, similar to how authors utilize a 3-act structure to map narrative arcs. The overture also contains 3 of the leitmotifs used in the soundtrack. Fontaine begins with just 2 instruments, a celeste and a glass harp. The ascending and descending melody that begins the overture, which I'll call the Sinner's Motif, for me reflects the beginning of the foretold prophecy and provides us with an introduction to the story of Furina and Focalors. Here is our Sinner's Motif. This motif also plays in the last rows of the Sinner, when we enter Furina's inner world in Act 5 of the Archon quest. In-game, this acts as our introduction to Furina's backstory, and in our overture, it does the exact same. The use of a glass harp and celeste to introduce the motif represents innocence with fragility, and I also love the use of a glass harp to not only represent the fragile nature of Furina's mental state, but because the instrument is played with water, it is perfect for a nation of Hydro. As the motif develops and our orchestration expands, we can hear the creation of Furina by Focalors. Before Furina is given the role of the Hydro Archon, she witnesses Focalor in the mirror. Our glass harp and celeste combo reflect this encounter in the mirror and sets the stage for Furina's role in deceiving the world. Our next statement of the Sinner's Motif expands on our orchestration by adding female choir, harp, and strings, and the strings play this kind of chromatic run that feels very magical and playful. Think John Williams' Harry Potter. This, to me, describes the plan for Furina and the prophecy, the curse of immortality placed upon her, and her ascension ceremony as Fontaine's new Archon. We get a bit more of the waltz tango combination and Baroque influence of Fontaine's music, with the addition of accordion and harpsichord. This feels more like theater acting and confidence, which Furina channels to convince the people of Fontaine that she is their archon. We end our first Sinner's Motif section of the overture with celeste, piano, and high strings, and it kind of references the fragility of Furina's nature and how one mistake in her facade could break the illusion of her new identity. We move on from our exposition and go into our development section of our overture, which continues our story. The orchestra begins this grand and elegant waltz utilizing the motif of Focalors. Utilizing classical modulation paired with a wonderful waltz orchestration, the development section of the overture flows like water and continues its path without hesitation. In this section of the development, we see Focalors' side of the story, and after giving Furina her order, she keeps her gnosis within the Oratrice Mécanique.
We now turn to the Oratrice Mécanique d'Analyse Cardinale,
accumulating indentium, an energy source created by the people's faith in their archon. All of this energy is stored to be powerful enough for Focalors to execute herself and destroy the Hydra Archon's throne. And when we finally reach our verdict from Act 5's trial, we witness this execution and the powers of the Hydra Archon are returned to Neuville. Similar to our waltz, this process steadily marches on for about 500 years and only growing in power and in our orchestration. Around our 2-minute and 14-second mark of the overture, the orchestra suddenly goes into this descending waltz transition that begins on this absolutely amazing striking minor 5 chord, and to me this chord signifies sudden and intense change, which in the story alludes to the sudden accusation of the traveler on Furina being a fake archon. I feel this chord also alludes to how the Great Flood foretold in the prophecy suddenly happens in Poisson, and the grand majestic waltz of Focalors' plan is suddenly interrupted, and hesitation of Furina's identity begins. This works perfectly as transition music-wise as we continue the development with Furina's motif. Furina's motif is very interesting to me as it utilizes a tritone, or an augmented fourth/diminished fifth. In Baroque times, this is often called the Devil's Interval and was rarely used in Baroque music, which is a huge influence on Fontaine's soundtrack. The use of the tritone for Furina's motif feels very deceiving, and it kind of shrouds our vision of the entire story. I believe this reflects her personality so well during the Archon quest, as she hides information and avoids questions with ease. And in the Fontaine track, Furina's motif is accompanied by the waltz showing her involvement in Focalors' plan while keeping her identity a secret. Furina's motif is also stated by soloists in the orchestra. Having soloists state her motif describes her feeling of loneliness. We first begin with it being stated by the trombone, and then stated by the accordion, and then lastly it's finished off by a solo violin. The orchestration expands and grows in intensity, which I feel showcases her 500-year struggle with loneliness, fear of exposure, and mental burnout, and from playing her role in the grand opera. As we continue developing from Furina's motif, the female choir re-emerges into the mix, and in typical film music fashion, choir and vocals are often used as a cry of humanity, which I believe is present in this track as well. The addition of specifically a female choir alludes to not only the cry of the women from the serial disappearances case that we saw in Acts 1 and 2 of the Archon quest, but to Furina herself and her suffering. As we head into our recapitulation, Focalors' motif is restated, led by the piano and accompanied by the orchestra. I believe this section shows us the execution of Focalors and the ending of our prophecy. The sudden cut off with the piano into a lush string section and glorious brass that states Focalors' motif one last time tells us the end of Act 5. Focalors and the tone of the Hydra Archon are executed, the waters of Fontaine rise to drown and dissolve the sins of the people, and the verdict given by the heavenly principles comes true. However, the track does one last ascending waltz. The orchestra goes back into the depths, and out emerges our glass harp and celeste combo from the beginning, reflecting Furina alone, weeping on her throne. I have been loving getting back into Genshin Impact's story and listening to all of the music that I missed out on when I took a break from playing. If you weren't aware, I am a composer for film and video games, and I love when composers like Meng Wan have these bits and pieces of storytelling in their music. This is my first music storytelling analysis video, so if you enjoyed it and want more music analysis videos, let me know. Thanks for watching.